Welcome, everyone. As you're coming in here, it's great to be with you on this Sunday morning, joining us from wherever you are today. I'm Jennifer Stanley, and I've been practicing with IMCW since the year 2000. And actually, now that I think about it, it was April 12th of 2000 when I joined IMCW. And I've been a teacher for about 11 years now. And I'll be moderating this session with Tara Brach, the IMCW founder. And we're so happy to see those of you who can be here with us live, and knowing that many folks will be watching this recording later. So welcome, everyone. This is the second Sunday Dharma series. It's a fundraiser for the Insight Meditation community of Washington, D.C., and we gather usually on the second Sunday. We had to make it the first Sunday this particular month. But usually it's the second Sunday that we get together and spend some time getting to know an inspiring Dharma teacher and their take on the state of the world through the lens of the Dharma, and of course their own practice and what's most important to them. And today we are very honored to be with Tara Brach, as I said, who founded IMCW in the 1990s. And before we get to that, I just wanted to let you know that we have Miyako today, who's providing ASL interpretation. Thank you so much, Miyako. And coming up in May, we will have Joe Weston, hosted by La Sarmiento. And Joe will be talking about Fierce Civility, his most recent book, Fierce Civility, Transforming Our Global Culture from Polarization to Lasting Peace. So that's something to look forward to in May. And now we can start our conversation with Tara Brach, just checking in about, this is such an intense period in the world history, here in the United States, but all around the world, and how much it can end up being divided, not just globally, but personally in families and friendships. And, we'd like to hear your take, on this dividedness and what to do about it.
Well, thanks, Jen. And it's great to be with you. Jen and I have been just kind of for many years, joined at the hip in the ways we were serving IMCW, and have just known each other as teachers and friends for a long time. And now I'm looking at all of you in your little boxes. And what a pleasure. I just have to say, I see a lot of familiar faces and some that I feel like I haven't been with before. If you don't mind, would you just raise your hand if I've never been with you before in some sort of a teaching setting? Yeah, okay. Wow, new friends. Just looking through, scrolling. Well, it's a pleasure. And oh my gosh, this theme that we're exploring, I'm imagining that it's pretty forefront on many minds. And I'm just thinking of, recent news in this country, in the United States, that we just know that the polarization, the dividedness is getting more and more. And that's sad and scary. And that through history, it's part of our evolutionary predicament that we come into existence and feel separate. It's the architecture of the brain. And yet it's also part of our evolutionary unfolding to wake up and see that and feel this real yearning to know who we are in our togetherness, to feel that sense of oneness. So I'm jumping from the particulars of a very polarized humanity right now to how it's been all along, that movement towards realizing our togetherness. And yet the survival brain just keeps kicking off fears, and with that, spirals of reactivity.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about it, and Jen and I'll speak some. I'll lead a meditation, and and then we'll invite your questions.
Right. Yeah. And in fact, you can type in your questions in the chat and send them to the Ask Questions Here, spot. And then we'll collect those questions, and we'll have time to address those later on. Tara, that's so, I really loved what you were saying. And I was thinking about how it can be so helpful sometimes to have people contemplate common humanity, or, sometimes even just in the sharing, when they're sharing their struggles, they can see that they're not alone in this, that it's like, oh, I'm having this feeling too. And it's whenever I do any teaching and I guide people into that common humanity piece, just seeing the expression on their face, oh, I'm not alone, is so powerful.
I'm so with you. I mean, if we really asked around and sensed who's caring about what I'm caring about, we all are caring about our world. And there's something about feeling us, here we are caring, that brings that up. And I feel like there are two approaches to bridging separation. And one is what you just brought up, Jen, which is to look towards the sense of our belonging. Mm-hmm. Any practice of love, of compassion, of joy, of gratitude, of remembering our common humanity. And I would go beyond the word humanity. I always have an objection to that, because it's really our shared beingness. It's all beings. It's non-human animals, and humans so quickly make a divide between themselves and the rest of the natural world. So I'm just tossing that one out there. So that's one approach, is looking towards where we belong. And then the other approach is to start right where we are, with the feeling of, wow, look how I'm creating separation in my own life. Look how I'm separated from myself. And we often turn to this beautiful messaging of hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. This is the ancient eternal law. And it's in Buddhism, and it's like the beautiful message of Martin Luther King. It's so many places. And yet the inquiry here, and I want to spend a little time on this, and is if we find ourselves in hatred, or let's say it's a more mild version of blame or resentment or anger, what shifts us? What opens us towards love? Like, what's the pathway? So I'd like to look at that a little bit and maybe just speak to it. Is that good, Jen, that I'll just speak to that one?
Yeah, for sure.
Because that feels like the inquiry we have. And one thing that really feels important, and I'm just sensing all of us here right now, and I'm making some assumptions that there's a commitment to waking up, to looking at our own lives, that inquiry of, well, where in my own life, unconsciously or consciously, am I creating separations. And this is where we're going to do our meditation today, which is, where is there some of that, it's not as overt and jarring as hatred, but where is there kind of the blame or resentment that eats away and corrodes relationships, that actually keeps us from really feeling tender and open and intimate, where we feel more defended. And one of the metaphors I often use when any of the levels of hatred, anger, blame, resentment are up is the image from Asian art of these animal-headed deities. Mm-hmm. It's really powerful because you find them, in these mandalas, kind of at the, they're guarding sacred space, basically. They're at the entry to sacred space, or at temples. You'll see these animal-headed deities, and you can't enter the sanctuary unless you move through them, unless you actually engage with them. And that's why sometimes trying to turn towards love too quickly bypasses the engagement with these deities. And the deities are basically sacred energy that has become in some way torqued. So it's sacred energy, but because of fear, it gets torqued. And then just like imagine a hose or something that's twisted, the energy builds up, then it gets, and the symptoms are suffering. So I think of our practices of mindfulness and compassion, we bring them to these kind of torqued, to these animal-headed deities, the emotions, basically. And that untorques them so that it frees up that energy. So the first, to me, powerful teaching about this is that when you're angry, when one of those deities is expressing, the first step is to actually honor it, to not push it aside and think, oh, you're an obstacle. And I'm saying that because often on the spiritual path, we have this idea that anger is bad. We're not supposed to feel angry. And yet all of the deities are intelligent. So anger is bringing our attention to an obstacle, to something that's blocking us from meeting our needs for safety or respect or love or whatever it is. So instead of subduing the demon, trying to get rid of our anger, the first step is just to sense, what's the message here? Like, I'll give you one example that stayed with me for years. This woman who was in her mid-20s, and she couldn't create a distance from her alcoholic father, who just kept re-traumatizing her with his anger. And so she was depressed and anxious, and we worked, and it was only until she said out loud, I'm being abused, and then really open to her rage, the deity of rage, that she was able to loosen up that energy and actually take care of herself. So anger tells us that we need some boundaries, and it has a message. It's trying to help in some way. And if we don't listen to the message and we bypass it, it just keeps coming up. Now, here's the deal, though. As we know, if all we're doing is giving airtime to the anger, and if all we're doing is caught in the narrative, you're wrong, you're bad, then we get hooked on the story and the feelings of a bad other, and we don't actually release the more pure energy underneath. Getting back at revenge doesn't work. So I often think of Ruth King, who Jen and I know really well. She's a friend, teacher, author, Black woman, fantastic book, Mindful of Race. And she says, anger is initiatory, but it's not transformational.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's so powerful. When we start to really honor that anger, then that energy can be used for other things. Like you were saying, it gets torqued, and it really can limit us in so many ways in our lives, even ways that don't seem necessarily connected. So once we start to let that go, then we have energy to address not only what's making us angry, but the whole rest of our lives too.
That's exactly right. It becomes, one of my friends says, it gets repurposed. Yeah, no, I love that. So here's the deal, that whether it's the low-key anger we call blame or judgment, or the fullness of rage, rather than acting out or fixating on the story of you're bad, you're wrong, the first really big step is what I call taking the U-turn, just bringing the attention to, okay, what's going on inside, and bringing mindfulness and compassion there. And I thought I'd share an example from my own life of what that does. And because this is basically going to be the model of the meditation we'll do. And the example is, it's one I actually haven't shared before, because this is a dear friend who I've known for decades and decades. And I realized, about 20 years ago, that we were caught in a looping of mutual judgment. We were judging each other in a way that was creating a distance. And the theme was, she was feeling that I wasn't prioritizing her enough, that I didn't give enough time. I just wasn't really, wasn't showing up. And my experience and my judgment of her was, you're judging me. And the more you judge me, the less I want to spend time with you. And I'm suspecting some of you are familiar with that kind of looping. And so, and it was painful because I love her and I didn't want to, but I couldn't feel my love. It was more like it became an abstraction. So I did just what I was saying to you. I recognized, okay, this is separation. This is suffering. And I did that U-turn, and I brought RAIN, which many of you are familiar with, which is mindfulness and compassion, to what was going on. If you're not familiar, RAIN's the acronym that goes for recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. And those 4 steps arouse the beautiful and transformational energies of mindfulness and compassion. So I did the U-turn, and the first recognition was, I'm angry. And then I allowed it, the A, I let it be there. And again, with anger, you don't want to say, oh, I shouldn't feel it. Just let it be there. And then went deeper in investigating. Investigating is primarily somatic, but first the belief was, oh, you're making me feel like I'm a bad person. I don't want to feel like a bad person. And then as I investigated, I could feel this squeeze inside me that's very familiar, where I feel in some way I'm failing. And that brought on the nurturing, which was, for me, I put my hand on my heart and said, trust yourself. You care, you're loving, you're okay. That opened me up. It's like there was an untorquing of that energy. And so I could feel my body more alive. I could feel, it's kind of like that torqued energy could rejoin the whole of my being. And my heart was more awake. And then I could look at her with more openness and caring and clarity. And what I could see is she's feeling hurt. And I knew enough about her that I knew that it harkened back to very young experience of not being cared for well by her caregivers. And I could just see it. And it's not to do with me. It's not like I'm bad. It's a sad situation. I could feel that compassion. And here's how it translated. When I was with her, I wasn't having to defend myself so much, defend my good personhood. I'd already done the inner work. Yeah. So I could naturally be more warm and it was more gratifying to be with me for her. So she wasn't feeling like so much that I wasn't showing up. I wasn't so defended and withholding. And it started changing that downward spiral towards more connection.
Yeah.
Does that, I hope that resonates as an example of one that's not, somebody killed somebody in my family and I'm trying to open my heart to them. It's a more daily kind of resentment. Right. But, oh my gosh, if we can't heal the divisions between us and our own hearts, come back to intimacy with, oh, so I was feeling bad about myself. Okay, it's okay. And then with the people that are in our closer circles, how will we be able to then see those where there's major cultural or political or racial or ethnic or religious or whatever it is differences, and be able to see, it's not self and other, there's a we. How will we be able to do that if we don't bridge the more close-in ones? And I'm not saying it's either or, because I think we have to operate on both levels.
Yeah. That's so powerful. I notice, when people are going through this process, sometimes the allowing part can be really challenging, because the recognizing, usually that's pretty easy, but sometimes I see people kind of want to jump over the allowing, and speed through to the rest. And I've also noticed, what was the allowing, and feeling it in the body sometimes. That can be really challenging sometimes for folks. We're talking about finding these emotions in the body or the tension in the body, and it can be elusive for people, and so how can they get, find it, so to speak?
Well, first of all, thank you, Jen, because you're asking about the pieces of mindfulness and compassion that are actually the real challenges. I find what helps with the allowing is, I sometimes will imagine an ocean with waves and just say, look, this is a wave in the ocean. It belongs. It's not going to be here forever. It doesn't identify me. It's okay that it's here. Or I'll imagine it as, okay, this is an animal-headed deity. And that actually, okay, this is meant to be part of it. And it's not like we're on the spiritual path and we're trying, and something's gone wrong when these emotions show up. They're universal. They're programmed into every nervous system. They have an intelligence. They're just asking for our attention. So those are just ways I frame it for myself. And when I'm teaching that, again, it helps us to know we all have it. It's like I carried this blame and anger towards this close person and, for a long time. We all have this stuff. Yeah. That's one piece. So, and then you're exactly right. Investigate. For mindfulness to be full, we need to be able to witness and contact all the different layers of experience. And that means it includes our beliefs to see, what's the narrative going on. But the hardest for most people is to feel where the vulnerability is in our body. And we know this. We know that the issues are in our tissues. And for many of us, we spend a lifetime leaving our bodies because it felt like too much. So that's really part of the dedication on the path, is to just gradually, gently, as slowly as we need to feel safe enough, find ourselves, coming back into our bodies. And a trick I find helpful with rain, we're going to do this, but I'm going to tell you right now, is first to put your hand on your body. I usually put my hand on my heart because there's actual science that shows that the warmth of the hand and the contact in the heart area helps to relax fight, flight, freeze, and make things more safe. But I also invite people when they're feeling a feeling to let their face express it and let their posture express it. Because even if you don't have good contact with somatic experience, once you know, let's say you're angry and you let your hand be in fists and you kind of clench your jaw, it helps you get in touch with an emotion that's been elusive. So I'm just tossing those out there.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
So I'm just going to say a couple more words if we want to widen this out. So let's say you might be saying, okay, it's one thing with people close in. What about people who are really, really different from us? Couple of things. One is when there's been abuse or when we feel threatened by other people, when they feel like they've created great harm, either to us personally or through the generations, trauma through the generations, such as racial harm, it's misguided to try too quickly to forgive or have compassion. It takes a lot of time to bring the compassion within, to feel a kind of inner sense of wholeness and feel connected to others before we try to open our hearts and get re-traumatized potentially. And there is an image I love from, this is Joan Halifax, Roshi Joan Halifax, and it's having a strong back and a soft front. And what she means by this, and I find this useful for all of us, what she means is it's really important to take the messages from what's going on and make sure that you feel protected, safe, stable, that you have that empowerment, like the spiritual warrior, that kind of clarity, so you're safe enough. Mm-hmm. And so we have to cultivate that. For me, in that situation, which was a low Q on, it really took some self-compassion and reminding myself I'm not a bad person, to have that strong back. But then the soft front, and this is where the nurturing, we nurture ourselves. If you can truly be tender to your own vulnerability, that tenderness will naturally include others. Yeah. And the reason is that tenderness starts dissolving the illusion of separation. Yeah. We no longer feel so separate from our own hearts. And in that opening, there's an openness that naturally includes others, because the truth is we do belong. So it's easier to feel that, and it's easier to see then the vulnerability in others. And one of my models, Ruby, and I'm forgetting her last name this moment, but she's a civil rights elder and just really inspiring being. And she said that what changed her in her inner work and her work with others really was this one question, which is, where does it hurt? Mm. Where does it hurt? And so that's the question we begin to be able to ask others. Sometimes it's best not to think of them as individuals, but really sense the bigger question of where does it hurt, and know that it's really the forces of greed, hatred, and delusion that are living through, that it's not about an individual, because we often end up blaming an individual, and that's not what's going on. So, yeah.
And it's so, when you're working with that vulnerability and tenderness, it's like a paradox, because then you can start to feel more connected and feel a sense of strength, and a lot of times even fear can dissipate to some degree, because you're feeling so connected at that point.
That's exactly right. It really gives you a strong back that allows you to then reach out. And then when you're talking to others, especially others that are really different, rather than having to prove something or convince them, and I want to say to you all, I'm pausing here because this has been so helpful to me. I really approach it like, can I listen to understand? Can I learn something? It's like, what makes you believe what you believe, really? And what really matters to you? And I think of Daryl Davis, another inspiration. He's a blues musician, Black, living by these teachings, where he actually befriended many Ku Klux Klanners, and just really something astonishing. And what he says is, if you spend 5 minutes with your worst enemy, you'll find you both have something in common. Now, we're not all cut out for this, by the way. I mean, some of us, that's just not where we'd go, and it could be actually something that would be re-traumatizing. But the point is this: we can, each of us, work with, can I get reconnected to my own being? Can I reconnect? Can I bridge the separations? If we each did that just with people around us, we'd be creating the kind of heart space that can then widen and widen, and we can stretch. And when I have a conversation with someone who really has a different view, and I go into it with, let me see how much I can learn, it becomes interesting, it becomes powerful, it changes my heart around. And I do find out it's us beings here together.
Right. Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, let's practice. I want to make sure I want to be able to hear and hear from you and get your questions. And we'll do a meditation, and then really know that anytime you want to put a question in the chat, you can, because, we're going to be checking them.
Right. And put them, direct the questions to find the line in there where it says ask questions, and then Glenn will compile them.
Yeah. So take a moment to find the position, way of sitting, however you are, that feels comfortable, supportive. And as you settle in, if it helps you to close your eyes or lower your gaze, please do. Maybe take a few full breaths. Let your breath help gather your attention. Know that you're here. Just feel that sense of, okay, right here. Breathing, feeling awake in your body. You might notice that you can let go a little bit more right now and see what wants to let go. And then widen the scan or the attention. Bring to mind, and I'm imagining you might have been reflecting on this, some relationship where you feel like there's some distance that you wish weren't there. Some relationship where there's some not traumatizing level of anger or rage or hatred, but more like blame, resentment, continuing judgment. As you bring this person to mind, just know your deepest intention here towards more understanding, more connection. And now let yourself bring close in whatever situation reminds you of what triggers the reactivity and makes a distance. What's a typical way you two might interact that would arouse the resentment or the blame. So you can see the look on the person's face if you're seeing them, hear the words or read the words, whatever way they come to you that might evoke something. Let yourself get in touch with it. So you can kind of sense that you're contracting, that you're feeling that separateness. And you might even sense the worst part of it, like what's most bothering you. And pause here. And this is where we begin the mindfulness and compassion of rain by just recognizing, okay, so what's the emotions that are strongest right now? Maybe one emotion, maybe two. Could be anger, irritation, judgment, blame, resentment. You might mentally whisper what you're aware of. Just name them. And then the allow. And as we talked about, okay, this belongs. It's just part of the waves and the sea. It's a universal energy. It's one of the animal-headed deities. So just allowing, letting be, not adding judgment, not pushing away. That allows you to actually begin to deepen your attention with investigate and bring some curiosity here. Like, here's a chance to learn more, to get more intimate with your own experience. And you might sense what you're believing about the other person or yourself or what's happening. You know, it could be something like, well, they wouldn't act this way if they cared. And anything you're believing that might be continuing to trigger you. And even if there's not a belief there, just sense really what you're feeling. How does the behavior, what's going on, make you feel? So you really feel into the sensations and emotions that are here. And you might, as I suggested, kind of let your face take it on, your posture. And this is where, just exaggerating a little, really sensing yourself embodying it, like you're sculpting your face and your body to express what you're feeling. And feel your face from the inside. So you can sense really what's the felt sense here. Maybe under the anger, sensing the vulnerability, going right into your body where you feel most vulnerable. And it may be your throat or your chest, your belly. And it helps to deepen that connection with your body by putting your hand on your heart. And that's actually beginning to nurture at the same time. Let the touch be tender. And deepen your investigation to ask, you know, what's the need here that I had that didn't get met? What was I wanting that didn't happen? What was I hoping for? This is a real question to that vulnerable place. What do you most need? For me, I needed to feel I was okay, that I was valuable, that I was worthy. What do you need to feel? What do you need to trust? And as you continue to pay attention to the vulnerability, sense that you can also begin to occupy your most wise and loving self. Call on that. The nurturing comes from your wise and loving self, so call on that. regarding your experience with kindness. And from that larger space, just sense that you can offer what's needed inwardly. It might be just continuing to feel that touch, like I'm here and I'm not leaving. There might be some message. Trust yourself, trust your goodness, trust that you're lovable, trust that you're loved. Sending the message that feels most needed. And if it's hard to send it from your own high self, you might call in some being that you trust that's wise and loving to help with the nurturing. Calling on a larger source. You can call on a friend or your dog or a tree, spirit of the earth, grandparent, someone who's no longer around, the Buddha, Jesus, Divine Mother. Let the care and the nurturing really come through and bathe you right to the most vulnerable place. Letting the attention relax open. This is called after the rain. Just to notice the quality of presence that's here. And notice what's shifted. Perhaps you're sensing more spaciousness, more compassion, more tenderness, more openness, more clarity. Just drawing on whatever is waking up in your presence here as you shift your attention to the other person. That question, where does it hurt? What do you imagine that person is feeling when they're triggered? In other words, under the reactivity, where's the vulnerability? Where does it hurt? Imagine what they were hoping for in relating, what they were needing, maybe to feel respected or loved, important, understood. Just imagine. And again, sensing your most awake and loving heart, your spiritual heart, just to feel your heart's care as you sense that person's vulnerability. Just open to your natural response. Your wish for that person. And you might even take a moment to imagine their needs met, how they might be, how they might behave, be different. And then letting go of ideas of self and other, you might relax open and just notice who you are, who we are, when there's presence and caring. Just notice perhaps that field that Rumi talks about, or even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. And rest in that. Because that is more the truth of who we are than any story, any narrative of a separate self and a separate other. Mark Nepo writes, my soul tells me we're all broken from the same nameless heart, and every living thing wakes with a piece of that original heart aching its way into blossom. This is why we know each other below our strangeness, why when we fall we lift each other, or when in pain we hold each other, why when sudden with joy we dance together. Life is the many pieces of that great heart, loving itself back together. Okay, dear friends, taking some moments, if your eyes are closed, to open them. Taking a few full breaths, and thank you. Thank you for taking some time to deepen your attention together. Really, thank you.
It's beautiful, Tara. And now we have some time for questions. Let's see.
Hi, Ellen. There we go.
Thank you. Yeah. My question is, my separateness that I struggle from is when a loved one ignites a previous trauma. And how do I go about practicing rain in that kind of a situation?
Yeah, well, thank you, because I think for a lot of us, there's so much trauma. It's like trauma's not those other people. It's most of us have some trauma. And when it's triggered, it's not like we can just say, okay, I'm going to, embrace you in these moments. We really need to be able to have that inner care. So I'm curious for you, Ellen, what thus far have you found when you're feeling that it's triggered is helpful to you?
Oh, it's muting again.
Okay, here I am.
Oh, and it just got muted again.
It's an internal battle between trying to have connection, which I long for, and protecting myself and trusting. And I feel it like a foot is stepping in the middle of my chest. Like I just feel this pressure, and I know I am with somebody who is igniting this past trauma, and I just struggle. And then I feel guilty because I don't want that separation.
Well, it might be helpful just to sense the guilty part. And of course, you don't want it, but it's not your fault that past trauma happened. So I'm wondering if there's any way that you can remind yourself of that.
Yeah, I mean, I put myself on the receiving end, and I wouldn't understand the space, the disconnect. And so that's what it just troubles me. And I want to fix it. And I know, it's not, I don't know what's within my power and what's healthy.
Okay. So again, it's really a good question, because when we're traumatized and it's from past trauma, we want to be able to behave normally with the person currently, but it keeps getting triggered anyway. So I'm wondering, one question is, when you're not triggered, are you able to have the kind of conversation that says, it's not you, it's from the past. And when this happens, I need to pull away so I can bring some healing to that experience inside me. And is that something that, if you know about, it will make it easier when I pull away? So I'm just wondering, can you have that kind of conversation?
I think about that. I'm not sure, because the friends' walls are pretty high.
Okay. So just checking, because that's one way to create a little more space. The most important thing is going to be the strong back, the soft front. There's nothing you can do. Once you're traumatized, you really need to do the inner care. And you'll have to live with the other person maybe not understanding. But let's talk about the inner care. So do you work with a therapist on this?
Mm-hmm.
What have you found is helpful for the past trauma in helping to heal it?
I've done a lot of mindfulness work. I've, explored a different version of the rain that you talk about, with awareness and acceptance, and really focusing on self-love and self-care. And
what are your ways of bringing self-love and self-care, and what's your pathway for that?
I do therapy. I attend a lot of meetings. I read. I do yoga. I pray.
More the inner. So, how do you, in the moment, like if I said this moment with whatever you're feeling, can you really nourish? Can you bring self-care in this moment? What would be your pathway?
So for me, when I feel the pressure in my chest, I have a conversation with myself. I ask myself, like, what am I afraid of? What is going on inside of me? And I try to take the power out of that. I try and love myself and tell myself that, feeling that way it's so beautiful and it's part of me, and I'm uncomfortable and I don't want to always feel that way. And I try and help myself to just kind of take the power out of the feeling.
And does that help you?
Mm-hmm. A lot.
Good. So you already have this. I'm really sensing what your resources are already. You already have a way of communicating with that younger place in you. And I'm wondering, are you able to, this is more energetic, like actually send warmth and tenderness to her?
Yeah, that's where I struggle. I think part of me, to protect me, judges, and then maybe justifies, but I give myself permission to create space that I don't feel good about.
Is there anybody outside you, Ellen, that you trust that would say, hey, of course you need to do that. Of course you need to create space. You need to bathe in a kind of warm, safe space. And is there anybody outside, living, not living,
Yes. The people in my intimate circle say that, and I still feel this responsibility. I feel that if I were on the receiving end, I would not be okay with me. Mm-hmm. And therefore I feel like I want to make myself a little uncomfortable, and I want to do something that would be helpful to me if I were on the other side.
So there's a part of you, and let's just say that in addition to the very vulnerable, traumatized part, there's a part that's feeling responsible and kind of judges when you take space for yourself and feels like you're a bad person for it, that kind of judge place. And if you just for now, and because I'm sure many of you listening have the same thing, that you have a sense of how to take care of yourself, but there's a part of you that judges yourself for, not being more normal, not being able to take care of other people, not being able to do it the way you wish you could do it. So let's just address the judging part right now, okay? And can you let your attention go inside? You want to do a little practice with that? this is bringing rain to the inner judge, really. Okay. And just take a moment to say, okay, so there's the judge. And if it helps to keep your eyes closed while we do this, anybody that wants to join in, this is a meditation on the inner judge. So take a moment, Ellen, to remind yourself of when it comes up, when you're feeling like, well, if I was on the receiving end, I'd need such and such. I'm falling short for not taking care of the other right now. And just think of a situation where that judge comes up. Keep your eyes closed and nod when you know. Yeah. So recognize, just name, okay, judging, and see if there's anything else that comes with that. Is there anything else you're recognizing? You can speak, but keep your eyes closed to keep contacted.
Yeah, I justify the judge.
Okay, so there's the judge, and then there's the backup who's saying, and the judge is right. Right. Okay, so we've got the judge plus some. And then the allowing is, okay, so let that be there for now. You know, that judge is a kind of aversive part that is a wave in the ocean. It's one of the deities too, okay? So you're letting the judge be, and then go deeper and investigate and ask the judge, what are you trying to do for me?
I think my answer would be like, I feel other people's suffering so much. So I think trying to protect me from those feelings,
So
that I know I'm powerless over.
It's trying to protect you from those feelings of real care for others, compassion for others.
Feeling their pain, and being powerless to do anything about it.
It's trying to protect you. So by judging you and saying, well, you should be taking care of the people on the receiving end, on some level, it's trying to protect you from directly feeling their pain.
I judge them for being how they are in order to protect me from feeling their suffering, I believe.
So the judge is judging them.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens when you sense it's trying to protect you like that?
I really want to be able to live with feeling other people's suffering and be okay.
Okay, so go back inside and put your hand on your heart, if you will, and say to the judge, I see what you're trying to do. I really want to be able to feel feelings. But just include that. Say, I see what you're trying to do, and I really want to feel feelings. And just notice what happens. You're just including more truth right now. It's true the judge is trying to protect you, and it's true and you want to be able to. And sense what happens.
Yeah, it kind of takes some of the power away.
Yeah. So take a moment more and just hold with some kindness that there are these different parts in you. And they're natural parts, and they actually all have goodness in them. I mean, the judge is trying to protect you, and there's a part of you that wants to be able to play your edge more and feel more. They're both true, and the more you can include them both, the more you can find some space to navigate wisely. And just sense what you want to remember right now, what feels most important right now from just what we did.
Yeah, super helpful. Super helpful. Remembering the and my motives.
Yeah. Beautiful. You're on the path. It doesn't feel done or satisfying at times, but you're paying attention, dear. You have a really honest, dedicated presence to this, and that's going to keep on freeing you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate you doing it.
And now we have a question from Julie Rome.
So a lot of my question, I think, is you've addressed obliquely, but the question is, how can I send metta to people who so violently oppose my values? And I do mean violently. It's what I end up doing is getting into an intellectual argument when I'm trying to send metta, and that's not exactly what I want to do. So I'm at a loss with that.
Yeah. I just wonder if sending metta might not be the first piece for you to be focusing on. Because in a way, that's like saying, we know dividedness can only be healed by love, but we need to start kind of right where we are. And right now, for people that are very opposed to your values, there's something else going on that wants your attention. So when you think of those people and you think of what it stirs up, what's the emotion that's actually there?
Well, if I think of someone close in, which is the person that I worked with when we did the meditation, what's actually there is that I want to be accepted and celebrated and loved for who I am.
So rather than can you send metta to that person, the first thing is to realize, wow, I want to feel accepted for who I am. Yeah. Mm. And then I wonder what happens if you do that U-turn. Can you feel that acceptance towards yourself for who you are?
Whew. Yeah, I hear you.
I think we might be leaving that as a question.
Yeah.
But that, I can see you get it too. Mm-hmm. That's your place. And that's not, it's challenging, but it's also your place of freedom.
Yeah, because Tara, otherwise what I ended up doing in the exercise was an intellectual exercise.
Yes, exactly.
I know that this happened in her childhood. Well, that did not help one bit.
That's premature. It's premature to do. In other words, we need to make the U-turn and really come to some peace and caring and compassion for our inner life. We have to reconnect and bridge the dividedness from our inner life before we can authentically embrace another person. Yeah. Thank you, dear. Blessings.
Thank you.
And now we have Leah Meacham and Lauren Rodwin.
Now I can unmute. Thank you.
Hi there.
Hi, Tara. Thank you so much for today. Appreciate when you were referring to Roshi Joan Halifax, strong back, soft front, and talking about heart space. My question is, can we create the heart space where we have ripples that are so powerful that we can reach a tipping point, easing suffering on a global scale and meaningfully addressing the division in today's world?
So don't mute again. I want to ask you a question. So I want to hear again really what you're wondering. Like, what is it that's really inside you right now?
What's inside, Tara, is that when I think about the enormity of the divisions and the violence in our world, and I think about the fact that the Buddha's message has been with us for 2,500 years, yet so few people are becoming aware, I get overwhelmed that it seems that we can't really affect and change the world that we seek. And so I want to maybe to get your thoughts. How do you deal with the enormity of the suffering in the world and your thoughts about whether we can affect the change that we seek?
So what I'm hearing, and I want to make your name is?
I'm Lauren.
You're Lauren. Yes. I thought between that might be, but I wanted to.
Yes.
What I'm hearing that you're struggling with is how to have hope when it looks so bad.
That's right.
Yeah. And that you're not feeling so hopeful and inspired about the possibilities right now. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. And what to do about that. And again, I'm feeling like it doesn't matter so much if I have some thought, well, that, it looks bad now, but here's the good signs and we might, who knows? We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen to humans and other species on the planet. We just don't know. And so the question is, how do we want to then be with our life, and how do we want to act and relate? And I'm wondering for you, when you get in touch with that discouragement or hopelessness or whatever it is, what then? How do you work with that?
So I've done a little bit of reading of Joanna Macy, and she talks about even in the midst of...
Nope, you just went mute. Not yet.
How's this? Okay. I get a message saying, okay, so I'm back. Even in the midst of the crisis we face, we can still love this wonderful world. What else do we have? And I try, but it's hard when then you read in the news about gun violence and mass killings in our schools, and we can't protect our children. So I feel the pain of the world, and at the same time trying to feel the joy and love in the world. And maybe it's like the Buddha holding the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows, but it's very hard.
I don't think I could have said it better, Lauren. It is really hard. And that what you just described does feel to me like a path of truth, because we know there's beauty and goodness. And as Jen started off this way, there's something really powerful. Like, I'm here right now feeling your care about this world and that you're hurting, but the hurting is coming from care. And it makes me feel more warm and tender and connected because we're in that caring together, including the hard stuff, but we're in that. That feels like it's part of serving awakening. Just to pay attention to that feels like it serves awakening, because that's a truth. The truth is there's caring. It's like, I know so many people that care so deeply. That gives me hope. I know so many people that didn't used to be active that are engaging. That gives me hope. There's beauty every day that I'm learning to pause and take in. That gives me hope. So there's the hope side. And like you, I am, listening to how 18 million people are about to lose health insurance. That's like a really big deal. That, Medicaid. It's a really big deal. Like, those are humans that are really going to have a hard time. And it makes me cry, And I need to let that be true too. I need to have my heart broken. But if all I do, I need to make some choices on keeping both in there, because of negativity bias and our conditioning and the kind of stuff the news feeds us, it would be very easy to forget the love that's right here. So it's both end. And if you can keep including both end, there's a space you start discovering that includes some equanimity and some clarity and it's just like the goddesses are pure in their expression of aliveness that is a space that's bigger than this living, dying world. And we need to know that too. It's a space of presence that goes beyond the changes. That's a refuge. So you said it, and I'm just elaborating here, but I'm glad, since this is our last question, and this is today's inquiry on dividedness is probably the core inquiry of our times. I feel like what you brought in, Lauren, is like a really beautiful and honest place for us to conclude. So I'm very grateful. Yeah. Thank you, dear.
Yeah. Thank you, Tara, and the people who ask questions, and thank you for everyone for your presence today. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your generosity in supporting IMCW's Second Sunday Dharma series fundraiser. And the recording of today will be emailed to you in about a week's time. And I just want to thank you again, Tara. It's wonderful to be with you and with everyone else. And maybe people want to, look at all the squares and connect with our common beingness as we say goodbye.
Blessings to all. Love to all. Wonderful to be with you.